Now, because I want this ring to be mostly flat and just a bit rounded at the edges, I'm going to go all the way around it with the small flat file. I've actually gone over where the solder bump was, and that's all nice and smooth now. I'm going to keep going around this way. We'll do nice round curving strokes. If you do flat strokes, you end up with flat patches on the ring. You want this to be nice and round, so follow the contour there. See, it's getting nice and shiny as I do it. Of course, when it's polished at the end, it'll be much nicer than this. But still, it gives you a bit of an impression of what it's going to look like. So I want to go all the way around. Rings like this will tend, after you've made them, to be a little bit uneven, and often they'll be sticking up a bit at the edges, and you actually have a little bit of a hollow in the middle. That's what I find anyway. So sometimes you end up filing the edges off first, and then it works its way down to the middle, like that. See? Okay, I've gone all the way around the ring with the flat file now, doing this action the whole way, and it's quite a lot shinier now, and I've smoothed out most of the surface imperfections there. Next, what I need to do is make the sides flat. So for that I'm going to use the large flat file, and basically I'm just going to draw it. I have to go from the tip of the file towards the base because that's the way the file cuts. You can rub up and down, but you'll be wasting energy, and probably it's not good for the file either. Silver's a fair bit softer than the steel of the file, so it won't do too much damage to it, but it's not a good habit to get into. So I'm doing this, and you can see there's patches around the edge are becoming shiny, but there's dull patches there still, which are still hollows. So I'm going to keep doing this until the whole surface becomes shiny, and then I know I've flattened the whole surface. Okay, now I've gone all the way around on both sides, and it's nice and smooth everywhere. Problem is now I've got a bit of burring around the edges there, so I'm going to take the half round file. Initially I'm just going to use it to scratch off the burring, like this. It makes the tiniest of bevels in the process, which is fine. I'm actually going to file it a little bit more. You don't want really sharp edges on the edge of the ring, otherwise it will feel uncomfortable or cut you. So I'll get rid of the burring first. Now I've filed all the way around both the outside and the inside. I've got rid of almost all of the marks on the inside. There's still a noticeable mark where the join was because the height of the pieces was slightly uneven, but I've filed that back a fair bit. The main idea when you're filing is to try to remove all of the scratches except in the direction of the filing. So if you start filing at a different angle from any existing scratches and you get all of the scratches to disappear except for the new ones from the file, then you've successfully got a smoothly filed surface. After that we'll go through sandpaper and we'll rub in a different direction from the file strokes until all of the file strokes have disappeared, and then we'll use the buffer and polish it further until all of the scratches have gone completely. But before I do that, I'm going to put on a hallmark punch. So it's got a mark of 925, which indicates the 92.5% silver component of sterling silver. Now I'm just going to use a small piece of emery paper to smooth both the edges and the inside and outside. So I'll rub it flat on the edges, a little bit more, until the file marks disappear. That's looking pretty good. And on the other side. That's looking pretty good. And then I'll give it the once over on the inside. And then I'll continue on to the outside. Okay, I've finished sanding the ring inside and out now. It's got a kind of a satin sheen all over it. I've also rounded off the edges slightly with file before sanding the outside because I realised I had forgotten that step. So now it's pretty much ready for polishing on the buffer. Basically the first thing I need to do though is to wash it to make sure I remove any traces of emery before I put it on the buffer, because I don't want to contaminate the buffer wheels with emery. Alright, here's the ring. I've finished sanding it now with the emery paper. I've given it basically a smooth sort of satin sanded finish on the inside. I'm just going to leave the inside that way because I think that looks quite nice, and the satin finish from the sanding and filing will remain. It won't get damaged too badly by scratching. The outside of the ring will probably get scratched over time, will need to be buffed again, and when that happens the satin finish will disappear. So instead of using a satin finish on the outside, I'm going to give it a high gloss finish by buffing it on a buffer with Tripoli and Rouge. Okay, here's the buffer. On the left hand side we have the Tripoli wheel, on the right hand side we have the Rouge wheel. Tripoli, or cutting compound, is used to do the coarse polish, whereas the Rouge is used to do the fine polish that gives you the high luster at the end. We always make sure that we keep the Tripoli on the Tripoli side and the Rouge on the Rouge side, so we never confuse them, and that way we won't ever contaminate the Rouge wheel with Tripoli. Because if you contaminate it with Tripoli, then you'll never get a high gloss finish out of it again. In a moment I'm going to switch the buffer on, and once I've switched it on I'll use this block of Tripoli and I'll rub it on the wheel as it's rotating, and the wheel or polishing mop will then get coated in a fine layer of Tripoli, and then after that I'll actually hold the ring against the wheel and polish it. I'm telling you now before I switch the buffer on because it's a bit noisy. Now I've just polished a little bit of it, but you might be able to see there's a difference between the rather higher polished area here where I've rubbed it against the Tripoli wheel and the kind of dull area around the back where it's just satin from the sandpaper. May not show up very clearly in the video, of course. Anyway, I'll finish the job off now, and then I'll have to wash the ring afterwards to get rid of all the Tripoli before I start polishing on the Rouge wheel. Right, I've finished using Tripoli on it now. You might be able to see it's got quite a high gloss now, but it's not as glossy as it will be when we've finally polished it with the Rouge mop. So I'm just going to go and wash this now to remove every last trace of Tripoli, and my hands as well, because there's Tripoli on my fingers, and that way when I use the Rouge mop, the Rouge wheel, I won't contaminate it with Tripoli. The ring has now been polished to a sort of a medium gloss by the Tripoli. So you can see it's a fair bit shinier now than it was before. Compare it with the sort of dull finish on the inside, sort of much glossier on the outside. But it'll get even glossier again with a much higher luster after the Rouge. So now the ring's been polished on the Rouge wheel, the Rouge mop. It's got a very high gloss, very high luster. So I've polished around the edges and around the outside. I've left the inside with the satin finish it had originally. And that's basically finished now. All I need to do is wash it carefully to remove the last traces of Rouge, and then it will be finished.